Billionaire loses his 4.8 billion company and panics until a 7-year-old homeless girl makes a touching proposal, leaving him in tears. Before we reveal this story, leave a like and comment where you're watching from and one dream you still believe in. The mahogany desk trembled under Alexander Hartwell's white-knuckled fists as he stared at the devastating numbers on his laptop screen. $4.8 billion. Gone. His pharmaceutical empire, built over 37 grueling years, was crumbling like ancient parchment in a wildfire. "Sir, the board is demanding answers," his assistant Margaret whispered through the intercom, her voice barely audible over the chaos erupting in the hallways of Hartwell Pharmaceuticals headquarters. The sound of boxes being packed, phones ringing incessantly, and hushed conversations filled the air like a funeral dirge. Alexander, 62 years old with salt and pepper hair, now disheveled from countless hours of running his fingers through it, felt his chest tightening with each labored breath. The hostile takeover by Meridian Corp had succeeded despite his desperate attempts to secure emergency funding. His life's work, the company that had produced life-saving medications for millions of patients worldwide, was slipping through his fingers like sand in an hourglass. The irony wasn't lost on him. Hartwell Pharmaceuticals had been on the verge of a breakthrough, a new treatment for pediatric lung diseases that could save thousands of children. Now, under Meridian's ruthless leadership, that research would likely be shelved in favor of more profitable ventures. "Cancel everything, Margaret. Clear my schedule. I need air," he managed to say before grabbing his coat and rushing toward the emergency exit, ignoring the elevator full of reporters who'd come to witness his downfall. The December wind bit his face like tiny daggers as he stumbled onto the sidewalk, his designer shoes splashing through puddles of melted snow mixed with city grime. He couldn't go home, not to that empty mansion in the Hamptons where his late wife Catherine's memory haunted every corner. She'd been gone 3 years now, taken by the very cancer his company had been desperately trying to cure. His breathing came in short, panicked gasps as the weight of responsibility crashed down on him. 30,000 employees would lose their jobs by Christmas. Patients worldwide would lose access to affordable medications. The charity foundation he'd built in Catherine's name would crumble. Everything he'd worked for, everything Catherine had believed in, was being destroyed by corporate greed. That's when he saw them. In the narrow alley beside his building, huddled against a rusted dumpster like discarded dolls, sat a small girl with tangled auburn hair and clothes that hung like rags on her tiny frame. In her arms, she cradled a toddler who couldn't have been more than 2 years old. The little boy's ribs showed through his torn shirt, his breathing shallow and labored with each rise and fall of his chest. The girl looked up as Alexander's shadow fell across them. Her eyes, despite everything she'd clearly endured, held a spark of determination and intelligence that reminded him painfully of Catherine during her final days. Brave, fierce, unbroken. "Mister, can you help us?" she asked softly, her voice carrying the weight of someone far beyond her years. "My baby brother Tommy is really sick, and I don't know what else to do." Alexander's world, already shattered beyond recognition, tilted completely on its axis. Here he was, mourning the loss of billions in corporate assets, while these innocent children had nothing, absolutely nothing except each other. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Alexander knelt beside the children, his expensive Armani suit soaking up the dirty alley water without a second thought. Up close, he could see the true extent of their desperate situation. The girl's hollow cheeks, the way she instinctively positioned herself as a shield between him and the baby. "I'm Emma, and this is Tommy," she said, adjusting the thin, threadbare blanket around her brother with practiced care. "We've been living here since Mama went to heaven 6 months ago. The shelter people said they couldn't keep us because Tommy needs special medicine, and they don't have the right kind of doctors." Alexander's heart clenched painfully. 6 months. These children had been surviving on the unforgiving streets of New York for half a year, and Emma couldn't be more than 7 years old. The mathematical impossibility of their survival hit him. How had a first grader kept herself and a toddler alive through a brutal winter? "What happened to your father?" he asked gently, though he suspected he already knew the answer from the way Emma's small jaw tightened. Her face hardened with a maturity no child should possess, years of disappointment etched into features that should have been carefree. "Daddy left when I was 4, and Tommy was just born. Mama said he couldn't handle having a sick baby, said the doctor bills and the crying at night were too much for him." Her small hand stroked Tommy's fevered forehead with infinite tenderness. "Tommy was born with something wrong with his lungs. The doctors used big words I couldn't understand, but Mama said it meant he needed special medicine to breathe right." Her voice cracked slightly before she gathered herself again. "Mama used to take him to the free clinic downtown every week, but after she got sick with the cancer." Her voice trailed off, but Alexander understood completely. He'd seen it countless times in his 37 years in pharmaceuticals. Families bankrupted by medical bills, parents forced to choose between rent and medicine, children left orphaned by diseases that adequate funding could cure. It was the very reason he'd founded Hartwell Pharmaceuticals with a mission to provide affordable medications. Tommy began coughing, a harsh, wet sound that made Alexander's blood run cold with recognition. The child's lips had a distinct blue tinge that spoke of severe oxygen deprivation, a condition that, left untreated, would be fatal within days. "He needs medicine," Emma whispered, tears finally breaking through her brave facade like cracks in a dam. "I've been trying to take care of him the way Mama taught me, but I don't know what to do anymore. The free clinic said they can't help without insurance, and the hospital said they'd have to separate us if we went there." Alexander pulled out his phone to call 911, but Emma grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her small fingers like steel bands around his arm. "Please don't call the hospital," she begged, her green eyes wide with panic. "They'll separate us and put Tommy in foster care. The social worker lady told us before. She said I'm too young to take care of him, and they'd put us in different homes. Tommy needs me. I'm all he has left." Looking into those desperate ancient eyes in such a young face, Alexander saw something that cut through his own despair like a lightning bolt. Pure, selfless love. Here was a 7-year-old girl who'd sacrificed her childhood, her safety, her very future for her baby brother, while he'd been wallowing in self-pity over losing a company. "Emma," he said carefully, his mind beginning to race with possibilities, "what if I told you I might be able to help Tommy get the medicine he needs? But in return, I might need your help with something very important." Her eyes widened with hope and suspicion warring in their depths, years of disappointment making her cautious even of kindness. "You want our help?" Emma's voice cracked with disbelief, her arms instinctively tightening around Tommy, as if preparing for another disappointment. "But mister, we're just kids living in an alley. We don't have anything anybody would want." Alexander studied the determined little girl before him, an idea forming in his mind. Crazy, desperate, but perhaps their only chance at survival. The media circus surrounding his company's takeover had created an opportunity, if he had the courage to take it. He sat cross-legged on the wet concrete, bringing himself to her eye level, despite the damage to his $1,000 suit. "Emma, what I'm about to tell you might sound strange, but I need you to listen very carefully and trust me." She nodded solemnly, her mature attention focused entirely on his words. "My name is Alexander Hartwell. I owned the biggest medicine company in America. We make the special lung medicine that could help Tommy breathe better. Today, some very bad people with lots of money took my company away from me through legal tricks and lies." Emma's brow furrowed as she tried to understand the complexity of corporate warfare, like when the mean kids at the playground take your toys and won't give them back, even when the teacher isn't looking. Exactly like that. Alexander nodded, surprised and touched by how apt the comparison was. But here's the thing. Tomorrow morning, there's going to be a very important meeting with all the newspaper people and TV cameras. The bad people who took my company are going to try to make everyone believe they're good and that they'll take better care of the medicine business than I did. Tommy stirred restlessly in Emma's arms, his breathing becoming more labored with each passing minute. Alexander's throat tightened with urgency. They were running out of time. Emma, I have an idea that could help both of us, but it's risky, and I need you to be the bravest little girl who ever lived. Are you willing to listen to my plan? She nodded without hesitation, her trust both humbling and terrifying. What if you and Tommy came with me to that meeting tomorrow? What if you stood up in front of all those people and told them about Tommy's sickness, about living on the streets, about how companies like mine make the medicine that could save him and thousands of other children? Emma's eyes grew wide with a mixture of fear and understanding. You mean, talk to all those important people? In front of the TV cameras? Yes, but Emma, this is very important. I'm not asking you to lie or pretend anything. I'm asking you to tell the simple truth about what you and Tommy need to survive. Sometimes, when people see real truth instead of corporate lies, they remember what's actually important in this world. He paused, watching her process this enormous request. If we do this together, I promise you 3 things. Tommy will get the medical care he needs immediately. We might save the company that makes medicine for thousands of other children like him. And most importantly, you two will never be separated. Not ever. Emma looked down at her dying brother, then back at Alexander with those impossibly wise eyes. And if it doesn't work, if people don't listen? Alexander's heart broke at her realistic understanding of potential failure. Then at least we'll have tried everything possible. But Emma, I think people will listen to you in a way they'd never listen to me. You have something I lost somewhere along the way, the power of pure honesty. And we really get to stay together forever, she whispered, the deepest fear finally surfacing. You have my solemn promise. Whatever happens, you and Tommy will be a family. The next morning arrived grey and bitter, with snow beginning to fall like tears from an overcast sky. Alexander stood in the marble lobby of Hartwell Pharmaceuticals headquarters at 6 a.m., having spent the sleepless night in a nearby luxury hotel room with Emma and Tommy. He'd used his personal emergency credit card, One Meridian Corp hadn't frozen yet, to buy them proper clothes and get Tommy preliminary medical attention. Dr. Sarah Chen, Alexander's personal physician and longtime friend, had arrived at the hotel at midnight to examine Tommy. Her diagnosis confirmed Alexander's worst fears. The boy was in critical condition with severe pneumonia, complicated by a rare congenital lung defect called bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Without immediate treatment, including specialized medications and possible surgery, Tommy had days, perhaps hours, left to live. Alexander, are you absolutely certain about this? Dr. Chen asked quietly as they waited for Emma and Tommy to finish getting dressed in the hotel bathroom. Using these children to make your point to the media, it's incredibly risky. If this backfires, you could destroy your reputation permanently. Sarah, I'm not using them, Alexander replied firmly, his voice filled with conviction he hadn't felt in months. I'm finally giving them a voice they should have had from the beginning. For 6 months, Emma has been fighting a battle that would break most adults, and she's been doing it completely alone. Today, the world gets to see what happens when our healthcare system abandons its most vulnerable citizens. Emma emerged from the bathroom, looking impossibly small in the new navy blue dress Alexander had bought her, simple cotton that brought out the striking color of her eyes. Tommy was wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, and she'd refused the wheelchair Dr. Chen had suggested, insisting on carrying her brother herself. "Mr. Alexander," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of a sleepless night spent thinking, "I've been practicing what I want to say, But I'm scared. What if I mess up the words? What if people think we're lying or trying to trick them? Alexander knelt before her, his heart breaking at her innocent concern about adult cynicism. Emma, the most powerful force in the entire world is truth spoken with genuine love. You love Tommy more than your own life, don't you? She nodded, tears glistening like small diamonds in her eyes. Then trust that love completely. When you speak from your heart about wanting to save him, people will hear something they rarely encounter in the business world: absolute honesty. But remember, we're not just asking them to help Tommy. We're asking them to help every child whose parents can't afford the medicine they need to survive. Through the floor-to-ceiling lobby windows, Alexander could see news vans arriving like vultures, reporters and camera crews setting up their equipment on the sidewalk. Richard Blackwood, Meridian Corp's ruthlessly efficient CEO, would arrive within the hour to announce his plans for Hartwell Pharmaceuticals, plans that included massive layoffs and dramatic price increases that would put life-saving medications out of reach for thousands of families. "It's time," Alexander said, gently taking Emma's free hand. Her small fingers were cold but steady. "Are you ready to be the bravest little girl in the world?" Emma looked down at Tommy, then squared her small shoulders with determination that reminded Alexander why he'd fallen in love with Catherine all those years ago. "For Tommy," she whispered. "I can do anything for Tommy." The conference room buzzed with anticipation and the electronic hum of television equipment as reporters and camera crews positioned themselves for Richard Blackwood's triumphant announcement. At 55, Blackwood commanded attention with his perfectly tailored charcoal suit and predatory smile that had intimidated countless corporate rivals. He'd built Meridian Corp's billion-dollar empire by acquiring struggling companies, stripping their assets, and maximizing profits regardless of human cost. The room was packed with financial journalists, pharmaceutical industry analysts, and television news crews from major networks. This takeover was big news. Hartwell Pharmaceuticals had been one of the last major independent drug companies committed to affordable pricing. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Blackwood began, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey, "today marks a revolutionary new chapter for what was formerly known as Hartwell Pharmaceuticals. Under Meridian Corporation's proven management strategies, we'll streamline operations, eliminate costly redundancies, and optimize profit margins to deliver maximum value to our shareholders." The reporters scribbled notes furiously, unaware that behind the room's back entrance, Alexander waited with Emma and Tommy. The little boy had grown visibly worse overnight, despite Dr. Chen's interventions, his breathing shallow and rapid, even with the portable oxygen tank hidden beneath his blanket. The previous management's unfortunately sentimental approach to pricing, Blackwood continued with practiced corporate speak, while perhaps admirable in theory, was financially unsustainable in today's competitive marketplace. "We'll be implementing immediate price adjustments across our entire pharmaceutical portfolio to reflect true market value and industry standards." Alexander knew what that meant in plain English. Medication prices would triple or quadruple overnight, pricing out exactly the families who needed help most. That was Alexander's cue. He gently pushed open the door, and Emma walked in first, with quiet dignity, carrying Tommy with the careful grace of someone who'd been doing it for months. The room fell silent as the assembled media turned to stare at the small girl in the navy blue dress, an unexpected presence in this world of corporate power plays. "Excuse me," Emma's voice rang clear and pure in the sudden quiet, cutting through the tension like a bell. "My name is Emma, and this is my baby brother Tommy. He's very sick, and he needs the medicine this company makes." Blackwood's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment at the disruption. "Security! How did these people get in here?" "This is a private corporate meeting." But the cameras were already focusing on Emma, and she continued speaking with the devastating honesty that only a 7-year-old could possess. Unfiltered truth in a room full of carefully crafted lies. Tommy was born with sick lungs, and the doctors said without special medicine, he's going to die just like our mama did 6 months ago. We've been living in an alley behind this building since then, and I've been trying to take care of him. But I'm just a little girl, and I don't know how to make him better. She gently shifted Tommy in her arms, and the cameras caught his labored breathing, his painfully thin frame, the blue tinge around his lips that spoke of a child slowly suffocating. Mr. Alexander told me that some mean people took away his company, the one that makes medicine for kids like Tommy. But I want to make them a promise right here, in front of everyone. Emma's voice grew stronger, filled with the desperate hope of a child who'd been forced to grow up far too fast. If you give the company back to Mr. Alexander so he can make medicine for sick children again, Tommy and I promise we'll work every single day to help save it. We'll do anything you need. Clean floors, sort papers, answer phones, whatever helps. We're not asking for charity. We want to earn Tommy's medicine by helping other kids get theirs too. The room remained frozen, every eye fixed on the impossible scene unfolding before them. The conference room remained suspended in stunned silence as Emma carefully lowered herself to her knees on the polished marble floor, still cradling Tommy with infinite care. The image was devastating in its raw innocence. A 7-year-old girl in a clean navy dress, kneeling before a room full of powerful adults, begging for her brother's life with the dignity of a queen. "Please," Emma whispered, her voice carrying clearly through the sensitive microphones scattered around the room for the media coverage. "Tommy is all the family I have left in the whole world. Our mama told us before she went to heaven that there are good people everywhere who help children when they're scared and alone. She said to never give up looking for them." Tommy stirred weakly in her arms, letting out a soft whimper that seemed to echo in the absolute silence. The sound was heart-wrenching, a sick child's cry that made several hardened reporters reach for tissues, their professional detachment crumbling. "Mr. Alexander is good people," Emma continued, looking directly at the assembled media. "He promised me that if we help each other, Tommy won't die, and lots of other kids won't die either. He said his company used to make medicine that families could afford, but now these new people want to make it cost so much that parents can't buy it." Alexander stepped forward, his own voice thick with emotion he'd kept buried for 3 years. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're really discussing today. Not profit margins or shareholder dividends, but children like Tommy who will die, literally die, without affordable medication. Emma and Tommy represent thousands of families who've been failed by a healthcare system that prioritizes corporate profits over human lives." Richard Blackwood attempted to regain control of his carefully orchestrated presentation. "This is nothing but an obvious publicity stunt. These people have no legitimate business interrupting a corporate—" "No legitimate business?" Alexander's voice rose with righteous fury that surprised everyone, including himself. "A 7-year-old girl caring for her dying brother has no legitimate business asking for help. Emma has demonstrated more courage, integrity, and genuine leadership in the past 24 hours than you've shown in your entire career of corporate destruction." Emma struggled back to her feet, swaying slightly under Tommy's growing weight, but maintaining her dignity despite the overwhelming circumstances. She looked directly at Richard Blackwood with those clear, fearless green eyes. "Mr. Blackwood," she said with heartbreaking simplicity, "don't you have children of your own?" The question hung in the air like a moral challenge. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably under the weight of every camera lens focused on him, acutely aware that his response would be broadcast to millions. "Of course I have children," he muttered defensively. "Then you know how much you love them, and how you'd do anything to keep them safe," Emma continued with logic that cut through every corporate justification. "That's exactly how much I love Tommy. And there are lots of other kids out there who need this medicine too. Kids whose mamas and papas love them just as much as you love your children. She paused, gathering her strength for her final plea. If you take away Mr. Alexander's company and make the medicine cost too much money, those children will die. Their families will lose them forever, just like I'm going to lose Tommy if he doesn't get help. And then in a moment that would be replayed on news broadcasts around the world, Emma added with the devastating honesty of a child, "I don't think you really want kids to die, Mr. Blackwood. I think maybe you just forgot for a while. That's what happens when medicine costs more than families can pay." Alexander watched as something unprecedented occurred in that room, a corporate predator being morally outmaneuvered by a homeless child who possessed nothing but love and truth. More importantly, he saw the media representatives, journalists who'd covered countless stories of corporate greed and human suffering, visibly moved by Emma's raw authenticity. The questions that erupted from the reporters would change everything. But first, Alexander had a life-saving promise to fulfill. He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed Dr. Chen. "Sarah, bring the surgical team and the ambulance immediately. Tommy needs that emergency operation now, and I don't care what it costs." Doom! As paramedics rushed in with a gurney and medical equipment, Emma never let go of her brother's small hand, whispering promises of better days ahead while tears of hope finally began to fall. 3 hours later, Alexander paced the sterile corridors of Mount Sinai Hospital's pediatric intensive care unit, his expensive shoes squeaking against the polished linoleum. Emma sat curled in an oversized chair beside Tommy's room, refusing to leave even for food or rest. Through the glass window, they could see Tommy's tiny form surrounded by machines, tubes helping him breathe, while surgeons worked to repair his damaged lungs. Dr. Martinez, the head of pediatric surgery, emerged from the operating room with exhaustion etched across his face. "Mr. Hartwell, the surgery went better than expected. We were able to clear the fluid from Tommy's lungs and repair some of the damaged tissue. However, he'll need ongoing medication for the rest of his life, specifically the bronchodilator your company developed 3 years ago." Emma jumped up from her chair. "Does that mean Tommy's going to be okay, Doctor?" Martinez knelt to her level, his voice gentle. "With proper medication and care, Tommy can live a normal, healthy life. But Emma, this medicine is very expensive, without insurance or assistance programs." "How expensive?" Alexander interrupted, though he already suspected the answer. "Under Meridian's new pricing structure, which took effect this morning, it's $4,000 per month. Most insurance companies are already balking at covering it." Alexander's blood ran cold. Even with his personal wealth, he could afford Tommy's medication indefinitely. But what about the thousands of other children who needed it? Under his management, that same medication had cost families $200 monthly, still challenging for many, but manageable with insurance or payment plans. Emma's small hand slipped into his. "Mr. Alexander, what does that mean for the other kids who need the same medicine Tommy needs?" Before he could answer, Margaret rushed into the waiting area, her phone buzzing constantly. "Alexander, you need to see this. The video of Emma's speech has gone viral. It's been viewed over 50 million times in the past 3 hours. She showed him her tablet, where news channels were running continuous coverage of the 7-year-old who challenged corporate greed. Emma's image, kneeling on that conference room floor, pleading for her brother's life, had become a symbol of everything wrong with America's healthcare system. "There's more," Margaret continued breathlessly. "Meridian's stock has dropped 30% since this morning. Investors are panicking, and there's talk of a federal investigation into their pricing practices." Emma looked up at Alexander with those wise green eyes. "Does this mean we're helping other kids already?" Alexander squeezed her hand, hope beginning to bloom in his chest for the first time in weeks. "I think, brave girl, we're just getting started." But as he spoke, his phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold and threatening. Mr. Hartwell, this is Marcus Webb, Meridian's head of legal. If you think using those children as props will change anything, you're mistaken. We have resources you can't imagine, and we don't lose. Ever. The line went dead, leaving Alexander staring at his phone with growing dread. The war for Hartwell Pharmaceuticals was far from over. 1 week later, Alexander's temporary office in a rented Manhattan suite buzzed with activity. He'd assembled a team of lawyers, PR specialists, and pharmaceutical experts, all working pro bono after Emma's story touched their hearts. The little girl had become an unlikely celebrity, with interview requests pouring in from every major network. Emma sat at a small desk Alexander had bought for her, carefully coloring pictures, while Tommy napped nearby in a portable crib. She'd refused to leave Tommy's side, even when child services had initially tried to place them in separate foster homes. Alexander's emergency custody filing had prevented that disaster, though the legal battles were far from over. "The good news," said Patricia Winters, Alexander's lead attorney, "is that public opinion is overwhelmingly on our side. Meridian's stock continues to plummet, and several major investors are threatening to pull out." She paused, her expression darkening. "The bad news is that Marcus Webb wasn't bluffing. They've filed 17 different lawsuits against you personally, Alexander. They're claiming everything from kidnapping to securities fraud. It's all nonsense, but defending against it will cost millions and could take years." Emma looked up from her coloring. "Are they trying to say Mr. Alexander stole us?" Patricia's voice gentled. "Something like that, sweetie. But don't worry, we have the truth on our side." Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. "Tommy's responding beautifully to treatment, ready to go home whenever you are." Home. The word felt foreign to Alexander. His mansion had never truly been home without Catherine, and now these children had filled a void he hadn't even acknowledged existed. "Mr. Alexander," Emma said softly, "I've been thinking about something. What if we visited other kids who need the same medicine as Tommy? Maybe if people see them too, they'll understand better." Patricia and Alexander exchanged glances. The idea was brilliant, but dangerous. Exposing more sick children to media attention could backfire spectacularly. "Emma," Alexander said carefully, "that's a wonderful idea, but we'd need to be very careful. Some people might think we're using sick children to make our point." Emma's eyes flashed with indignation. "But we're not using anybody. We're helping. There's a big difference." Before Alexander could respond, Margaret burst through the door, her face pale. "Alexander, turn on Channel 7. Now." The television screen showed Richard Blackwood at another press conference, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a well-dressed couple with a young boy who appeared healthy and happy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwood announced, "I'd like you to meet the Patterson family. Their son David has the same condition as the child featured in last week's emotional display. Thanks to Meridian's improved research funding, David receives the best possible care and is thriving." The camera zoomed in on David Patterson, who smiled brightly and spoke in a rehearsed voice. "I take my medicine every day, and I feel great. My parents say the new company is helping lots of kids like me." Emma's small hand clenched into a fist. "That's not fair. They're making it sound like Tommy and I are lying." Alexander felt his own anger rising. Blackwood was using the Patterson family exactly the way he'd accused Alexander of using Emma, except the Pattersons were clearly wealthy enough to afford the new pricing, making their testimonial a cruel mockery of families struggling with medical bills. "Two can play this game," Alexander muttered, reaching for his phone. The next morning brought a gathering that would change everything. Alexander had reached out through his network of former employees, many of whom had maintained relationships with families who relied on Hartwell Pharmaceuticals' affordable medications. The response had been overwhelming. Central Park's Bethesda fountain area was filled with nearly 200 families, each with a child who depended on medications now priced out of reach. The media coverage was extensive. Unlike Blackwood's staged corporate event, this was raw, authentic, and deeply moving. Emma stood before the crowd, no longer the terrified little girl from the alley. Holding Tommy in her arms, he was breathing clearly now, his cheeks pink with health. She spoke with confidence that belied her 7 years. "My name is Emma, and this is Tommy. A week ago, we were living in an alley because we had no money for medicine. Mr. Alexander helped us, but not because we're special. He helped us because helping sick kids is what his company was supposed to do." She gestured to the families around her. "Look at all these kids who need help too. They're not asking for free stuff. Their mamas and papas work hard and want to pay for medicine. But when medicine costs more than people make in a whole month, kids get sick and die." Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the crowd, recording everything on his phone with a cold smile. Alexander noticed him, but refused to be intimidated. A woman named Carol Stevens stepped forward with her 8-year-old daughter Lily, who suffered from juvenile diabetes. "Before Meridian took over, we could afford Sarah's insulin. Now we're rationing it, hoping she doesn't have episodes. Last week she collapsed at school." One by one, families shared their stories. The Johnsons, whose teenage son needed medication for cystic fibrosis. The Martinez family, with twin girls requiring treatment for a rare genetic disorder. Each story was a variation on the same theme: corporate greed, literally putting children's lives at risk. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had volunteered to provide medical assessments, addressed the crowd. "What you're seeing here is a public health crisis. When life-saving medications are priced beyond reach, we don't just lose individual patients, we lose our humanity as a society." Emma climbed onto the fountain's edge, Tommy secure in her arms. "I want to make another promise," she announced, her young voice carrying across the park. "Tommy and I won't stop fighting until every kid here gets the medicine they need. We're going to help Mr. Alexander get his company back, and we're going to make sure medicine costs what families can afford." The crowd erupted in applause, but Alexander noticed Marcus Webb speaking urgently into his phone. Whatever Meridian was planning next, it wouldn't be good. That evening, as they returned to Alexander's hotel suite, Emma seemed unusually quiet. "What's wrong, brave girl?" Alexander asked. Emma looked out the window at the city lights. "Mr. Alexander, what if we can't win? What if the bad people are too powerful and kids keep dying?" For the first time since this began, Alexander had no easy answer. The legal battles were mounting. Meridian had unlimited resources, and every day they delayed meant more children suffered. "Emma," he said finally, "sometimes the most important fights are the ones where victory seems impossible. Your mama taught you something I forgot, that love is stronger than money or power. We keep fighting because it's right, not because it's easy." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Tomorrow is Saturday. Can we visit more kids in the hospital?" Alexander smiled despite his worries. "Of course, we have promises to keep." The following Saturday brought news that changed everything. Alexander was reading bedtime stories to Emma and Tommy in their hotel suite when Margaret called with urgent information. "Alexander, you need to know. We've uncovered something huge about Meridian's financing of the takeover. They used illegal overseas accounts and may have committed securities fraud. The FBI is opening an investigation." But before Alexander could process this development, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the suite. Alexander opened the door to find Marcus Webb flanked by 2 federal marshals. "Alexander Hartwell," Webb announced with visible satisfaction, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud and endangering the welfare of minors." Emma screamed as the marshals moved toward Alexander with handcuffs. "No, you can't take him. He saved us." "Emma, listen to me," Alexander said urgently as his hands were secured behind his back. "Call Patricia Winters immediately. The number is in my phone. Don't let them separate you and Tommy, no matter what they say." "This is outrageous!" Margaret protested, but Webb silenced her with a cold stare. "Mr. Hartwell has been using these children as props in an elaborate scheme to manipulate stock prices. We have evidence of coordination between his so-called charitable efforts and short-selling activities targeting Meridian Corp." As they led Alexander away, he could hear Emma's desperate cries echoing down the hotel corridor. The little girl who'd shown such courage was now watching another parental figure being torn from her life. 3 hours later, in a stark interrogation room, Alexander faced Webb across a metal table. The charges were serious but clearly fabricated, a desperate attempt to silence him before the FBI investigation could proceed. "This is simple, Hartwell," Webb said, sliding a document across the table. "Sign this agreement to cease all activities against Meridian, publicly apologize for your publicity stunt, and arrange for the children to be placed in appropriate foster care. Do this, and the charges disappear." Alexander read the document with growing disgust. Beyond surrendering his fight for the company, the agreement would effectively silence Emma and Tommy forever, preventing them from speaking publicly about their experience or Meridian's pricing practices. "Never," Alexander said firmly. Webb's smile turned predatory. "Then you'll rot in federal prison while those children disappear into the foster system. We have judges who owe us favors, Hartwell. You can't win this fight." But as Webb spoke, Alexander's phone, which they'd allowed him to keep, buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the voice was one he'd never forget. "Mr. Alexander?" Emma's small voice came through the speaker. "Are you okay? Patricia got us a safe place to stay, and Tommy is asking for you." Webb lunged for the phone, but Alexander held it away. "Emma, I need you to be brave just a little longer. Can you do that for me?" "I can do anything for you and Tommy," she replied with fierce determination. "Patricia says the truth always wins eventually." After the call ended, Webb's composure had cracked slightly. "You're a fool, Hartwell. We have unlimited resources and political connections you can't imagine." Alexander leaned back in his chair, finally understanding something crucial. "But you don't have what Emma and I have, Webb. You don't have the truth, and you don't have people who fight for love instead of money." He looked directly into Webb's eyes. "And that, Marcus, is why you're going to lose." Alexander's arrest made international headlines, but the response wasn't what Meridian had anticipated. Instead of discrediting the movement, it galvanized support from an unexpected source: other pharmaceutical executives who'd been quietly watching the battle unfold. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, CEO of Walsh Biologics and Alexander's former classmate from medical school, held her own press conference just 12 hours after his arrest. Standing beside her were the CEOs of 4 other major pharmaceutical companies. "What Meridian has done to Alexander Hartwell is unconscionable," Dr. Walsh announced. "We're forming a consortium to purchase Hartwell Pharmaceuticals at fair market value and return it to its original mission of affordable medication." Meanwhile, Emma and Tommy were staying with Patricia Winters and her family, but the 7-year-old had become a force of nature. Despite Patricia's attempts to keep her away from media attention, Emma had convinced several news outlets to interview her via video call. "They arrested Mr. Alexander because he was helping sick kids," Emma told CNN's Anderson Cooper, Tommy sleeping peacefully in her lap. "But you can't arrest the truth, can you? Tommy is still here, still healthy because of Mr. Alexander's medicine. All those families in the park are still there, still needing help." Anderson Cooper, visibly moved, leaned forward. "Emma, what do you want to say to the people watching right now?" I want to say that kids are dying while grown-ups argue about money," Emma replied with heartbreaking directness. Mr. Alexander taught me that when you see something wrong, you have to try to fix it, even if it's scary. So I'm asking all the mamas and papas watching, please don't let them win. Please help us save the other kids. The interview went viral within hours. Save the Kids became the top trending hashtag worldwide, and protests erupted outside Meridian offices in 12 cities. In his jail cell, Alexander watched the coverage on a small television, tears streaming down his face. Emma had become the leader he'd never managed to be, fearless, honest, and utterly committed to something bigger than herself. On Tuesday morning, Patricia arrived with news that sent shockwaves through the financial world. Alexander, the FBI raid on Meridian's offices yesterday uncovered everything. Illegal foreign financing, bribery of federal judges, systematic price fixing across the industry. Webb and Blackwood were arrested 2 hours ago. But the best news came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen called Patricia with an update that left everyone speechless. "Tell Alexander that Tommy wants to visit him in jail," Dr. Chen reported. But more importantly, Emma has been accepted to testify before Congress next week about pharmaceutical pricing. They want to hear from her directly. Patricia shook her head in amazement. A 7-year-old testifying before Congress. "I've been practicing law for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like this." That evening, Emma and Tommy were finally allowed to visit Alexander in jail. The sight of them, Emma in a simple pink dress, Tommy babbling happily in her arms, filled him with hope he'd almost lost. "Mr. Alexander," Emma said seriously, "Patricia says you might have to stay here for a while longer, but I want you to know something important." "What's that, brave girl?" Emma's green eyes blazed with determination. "Tommy and I decided we're not just fighting for your company anymore. We're fighting for every kid who needs medicine, and we're not giving up until we win." Alexander reached through the bars to touch her small hand. "Emma, you've already taught me more about courage than I learned in 62 years. Whatever happens next, I'm proud to be fighting alongside you." As visiting hours ended and Emma carried Tommy away, Alexander realized something profound had occurred. The frightened little girl from the alley had become a voice for millions, and their impossible battle was about to become a victory. 3 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the rebuilt Hartwell Pharmaceuticals headquarters as Alexander signed the final documents returning the company to its original mission. The consortium led by Dr. Walsh had not only purchased the company back from Meridian, which had collapsed under federal investigation, but had also established the Emma and Tommy Foundation, dedicated to ensuring no child would ever again be denied life-saving medication due to cost. Emma sat in a specially designed chair beside Alexander's desk, Tommy playing with blocks at her feet. At 7.5 years old, she'd become the youngest person ever to testify before Congress, and her simple, powerful words had led to groundbreaking legislation, capping pharmaceutical prices for pediatric medications. "The first batch of Tommy's medicine under the new pricing is ready," Dr. Chen announced, entering the office with a smile. $200 per month, just like it used to be. Emma clapped her hands excitedly. "And how many other kids will be able to get it now?" "Over 15,000 children worldwide will have access by the end of this month," Alexander replied, his voice thick with emotion. The office door opened, and Margaret ushered in the Patterson family, the same family Blackwood had used in his counter-publicity campaign. Mrs. Patterson carried flowers, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Hartwell, Emma," she began hesitantly, "we owe you an enormous apology. Meridian paid us to appear at that press conference, and we were so worried about David's medical bills that we didn't think about other families who couldn't afford what we could." Emma stood and walked over to young David Patterson, who looked nervous and ashamed. "It's okay," she said simply. "Being scared about your kid getting sick makes people do things they wouldn't normally do." The important thing is that now David and Tommy and all the other kids can get their medicine." Alexander watched this exchange with wonder. Emma had learned to forgive in ways that most adults never managed. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Patricia Winters entered with official-looking documents and a smile that lit up the room. "Alexander, the adoption papers are finalized. Emma and Tommy are officially your children." Emma launched herself into Alexander's arms, Tommy toddling after her with a giggle. For the first time since Catherine's death, Alexander felt the complete joy of family. "Daddy Alexander," Emma said, using the name she'd chosen for him. "I have an idea for our next project." Alexander laughed, knowing that whatever Emma had in mind would probably change the world again. "What is it, my brave girl?" "I want to start a school where kids can learn about helping other people. We can teach them that even when you're small, you can do big things if you really love someone." Tommy, now 26 months old and thriving, climbed onto Alexander's lap and babbled what sounded like agreement. Alexander looked out his office window at the city where, just months ago, he'd lost everything, only to find something infinitely more valuable. Emma had taught him that success wasn't measured in billions of dollars, but in the number of lives touched, children saved, and families kept together. "Emma," he said, hugging both children close, "I think that's the most beautiful idea I've ever heard, and I know exactly where we can build it." As the sun set over New York City, three people who'd found each other in an alley began planning their next impossible dream, a dream that would ensure no child would ever again face the darkness alone. Emma looked up at Alexander with those wise green eyes that had started it all. "Daddy Alexander, do you think Mama can see us from heaven? Do you think she knows Tommy is all better now?" Alexander's voice caught as he answered, "I think your Mama and my Catherine are both watching, sweetheart. And I think they're very, very proud of the family we've become." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, illuminating a world where love had triumphed over greed, where truth had conquered power, and where a 7-year-old girl's promise had saved not just her baby brother, but thousands of children around the world. The miracle wasn't just Tommy's recovery, it was the discovery that even in the darkest alleys, hope survives in the smallest hearts, waiting to change everything.